Hi everybody, Jeremy Rowland here again with the 5 Pencil Method team. We're back again today with part 2 of Darrel's series on drawing a more realistic horse. In the first video, which I recommend you watch if you haven't seen yet, Darrel shared some quick, easy, and effective tips for adding depth and dimension to your horse drawing quickly. And today in part 2, he's going to share some really great tips about drawing fur. He's going to pick a spot on the horse and show you how to start drawing in the fur. Or hair, whatever you want to call it. But with that, we'll go ahead and hand it over to Darrel.
Hi everybody, welcome back to this second video. I wanted to again take this opportunity just to try to communicate a few things that can help you start developing your picture maybe a little bit faster. Not that this is a speed contest, but in the way that you envision your subject and how it's interpreting on the paper. There are a few things I talked about in the last video. Was trying to give you an idea about where to start with value. There's just a few things that are always so good about paying attention to some of these very solid principles. And one of them, I think, to create depth and dimension and all those things as quick as possible, is to make sure that you don't avoid having a nice clean edge where there is one. To pick out some of those darkest areas and always try to see a gradation, even if it's in a very small little place. Get a little closer just so you can probably see this. This is the one we had yesterday. And I hope you can tell, but try as best you can to see where it would be darker. Don't make it into a coloring book line to hold that darker edge, but just now start coming out lighter, lighter, lighter. The patches exercise in my free lessons is a real good exercise for this. It just trains your eye and trains you to use the mechanics that help you be able to put a gradation from just a whole bunch of lines stacked together, and you can visually see, and this is what you should do. You should always look to see if it is indeed getting lighter, 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 because this creates this principle that everything gets darker when it goes to where there's less light. It also creates a clean edge where this can believably be going underneath the mane that's hanging down over. And then when you have something like this that's going darker as it's going out of our sight, well, then we want to be able to have the darkest point at this edge. And we want to be able to have it be a fairly clean edge. And I mean clean edge, though, not just fairly. I don't want to fudge on that. But this should be a clean edge, even though this isn't just, again, a line going across here, and then we just make this into a perfect curve. It's a hairy edge if you look really, really close. But everything we want to have a clean edge on, because that helps us create something that has dimension. That means that there's something past this jawline and the jaw is in front. We are able to separate the two dimensions. So we went through, talked to you about maybe getting a lighter version so you can see some of those deep places, because otherwise you might be tempted just to make it dark from here to here. And everything that's the same color, the same value, is going to be flat. That's the same thing with here. Real easy to have this become almost a flat area. So just think logically, let's see, it would be darker where there's less light. So I'm going to try just to make this, even if it's just very little, a little darker as it goes down to that edge, unless there's a reflective light. But anyway, this helps us be able to create the dimensions. Now, there are other things that are going to help us with the light direction. That is helping us create a consistent mindset that we have a light direction of this horse. It really does help us to be able to create curve, dimension, form, and makes it believable, because we do usually have a particular light source. When we have a lot of them, that confuses the highlights, and it can really create a conflict in your drawing if you don't handle it right. So even on this, I don't see the bigger one right here, but you'll see even some variance in some of these places. That's because it isn't particularly or isn't completely smooth. It isn't particularly flat. It is actually curved. So it's brighter on this side and that white blaze is darker on this side. And then you have in and out, in and out, in and out. And so it's really good to see these things, but don't make too much out of them. We want to be able to look at this fur, and when I'm trying to do this horsehair, I wanted to make sure that I was making the point here that we don't want this to be so dark that it starts overpowering the things that are started out as the darkest things on my drawing, even though they might be done with the 4H, because I always want to have that opportunity to continue making things darker and darker so that I can see and determine the balance as I go along, especially towards the end of my drawing. So I'll gradually put a little more value in some of these places so that they stay ahead of other things that aren't quite so dark. So when you see something, you want to have the ability and the awareness not to make things too dark for what they are. When I'm doing the hair, the horse hair, I don't want to come in here and just do a smooth texture. So we'll just play around with a couple little spots on here. And what I want to do, though, is I want to notice the flow. As you see this going around, and then maybe it comes around again and it goes around. All these places are undulations. They're contours. And it goes deeper into the contour and it comes back up and over. It's catching the light a little bit. That's what's happening here. It's catching that light that may be shining from this direction. And you'll see it shaded on that other side of the hump. And then it catches the light and it's shaded on the down on the back side where it is getting very little light. And if you can think about these things when you're drawing, it's going to really help. But when you're starting the hair, it's easy to forget about this, because what you want to do is you want to document your hair direction, the flow. I call it sometimes the grain, because if we get it, you think about this like a current, like in a stream, and it's going around the different things to make its way downstream. I want to make sure I'm doing that and not concentrating so much on my strokes for the hair that I end up by making everything straight, because then I've just wiped out my opportunity to have this wonderful contour as it just again flows in and out of all these different places, the muscle structure, the veins, the bone structure, all those things. But what I want to do is I want to keep from making it too refined. Otherwise, I'm going to fill in my spaces so much that I'm going to end up by having basically a gradation. I'll end up by having all these so close together that it becomes just a range of value all within a place where there are places you can use this concept, like along that jaw. You can see how it's darker down here. We can use that, but we're going to use the strokes a different direction. And anyway, I just don't want to get so into making the hair that I make them all like that, where it's too close. And especially when we build them up, it can become very solid, just like that is right there. And so I want to be able to keep something that has a little bit more of an opening. And I'm going to use a pencil that isn't necessarily, and unless I'm just kind of documenting and finding my way with my 4H pencil, I don't want to come in here with something that's too hard, because then I'm going to end up by having to use another layer of pencil and another layer of pencil to continue making it darker. So we're going to kind of shortcut the process just a little bit. We're going to go ahead and just make sure we have some of the strokes, and I can always tap them back. If I'm using my stroke right, I always have the ability, or should have the ability, to be able to take something off of the paper. I'm not going like this, like I talked to you about yesterday, but I'm using a sharp pencil with that positioning of my hand, where that helps not only, if you get it down to the mechanics of this, it not only helps you have accuracy, and it has a natural flow to it because it has a curve, but then it also keeps you from scoring the paper. And that weight of that other half, that pointed half of the pencil, is not going to be, as it's not going to have the possibility of scoring as much as this would. That point is just really going to make it hard. So anyway, and then this helps you, like I said, keep your flow and grace. So I'm going to come through here and I'm going to just try to document, what direction this is going. So that when I get a little more committed, now I have an opportunity to just kind of follow my guidelines. So you could come in here with your 4H as long as you can see it, and you could develop these places that you can see. If you look closely, you can see that. When I get to something like this contour here, I don't want to just illustrate that with a line because really it's broken up. So I'm going to really back that off, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to use a steeper, a more condensed curve in there. But I'll work on that a little bit just to start creating that line or that edge. And so that helps me be able to keep these things wide open to a degree. Oh, I always go the wrong way. I think I'm probably as known for saying I just went the wrong way as anything else. Anyway, I want to make sure that I keep my stroke with a little bit of an opening in here. It's the same thing as if you're working on, let's just say, this ear. It's better not to have a line. If I want to stay away from a coloring book line, it's better for me not to have that and open it up a little bit. If it has a little bit of a fuzzy edge, then just allow for a little bit of a multiple line to make up that edge, so that you can come in there and continue to develop that and come up with something that is going to have. Let's see. Let's do it this way. Oh, I got too close. Something that's got this hairy edge, I want to come in and open it up and make my edge like so. It may seem like, oh, well, that takes too much time, but it sure does give a natural look to it. So I would take this and tap that back so that an initial sketched line, just to get the outline of it, is there. And then I'd come in and I would try to look at the direction, and I would make my edge with some opening so that I can continue developing it. I can make this closed in a little bit more and make it more of a definite edge, but still this gives me an opportunity to have a natural edge to it instead of something I'm trying to combine with all the other detail I'm working on. Okay, so let's go with this here. So you can probably see this goes like so, and it goes out, and it goes down, it goes up and over. So I want to catch those things. I want to get a little bit of an idea so that when I start coming in with one of those softer pencils like my HB, maybe even the 2B in places, I can know where I'm putting it. So I'm not putting on a lot of extra strokes. Makes it that much harder to get everything modified or off if I make a mistake. And yet, if I use a softer pencil because I know where I'm going, because I've made these initial lines, then I have the opportunity to use that extra soft lead that I'm putting on there to my advantage. And the nice thing about the tapered stroke is that I think I was talking about this yesterday. I don't want to come in here like so, where I have a row, and then I come down here and I do another row. Well, not only would I have that structure of rows, but you'll see that they overlap every so often. That's one of the problems with going back and forth, because when I try to fill the gap, I'm going to be overlapping on that, and you start seeing sections. Now you have a whole nother project of trying to refine those and get away from having those pieces that you put together. So if I use the tapered stroke, then I have the chance to stagger the ends, still leave some openings in between my strokes, and I have a chance to kind of go back up into it and overlap a stroke. I can do random links. I can just work in something other than those rows of strokes, and now I have something that's much more random and natural. And that's just one of the advantages of using that taper. So it's really good to work on it if you can and come up with a little bit more of a natural instead of this. Yeah. I was thinking of something. There's so many things to talk about. I just don't want to have this start happening, and that's the other problem that you can really run into, is having a very heavy landing. So practicing that stroke is really good, because then you can come in anywhere and add a little extra value because you put a few more lines in there to make it more of a deeper part of the contour. And if you get them too dark all over, then you can always come back in and you can start tapping back a little bit so that you can create your highlights again. But always visualize what you're trying to draw so that you know the difference between this part and that part. And there's still a texture in here. There's still that separation in the strokes, even in a dark area. I want to go ahead and add more as I go. So initially, I don't want to go ahead and put all my strokes that I'm going to end up with in one place and try to finish it as I go. I'm going to just look at the general idea that this is darker, make sure that my strokes are all going in the right curve, and complementing that structure. Having something that is tapered, again, is going to really help me. When I'm coming into another color here, it looks like this overlaps that. So I'm going to do what is kind of a shingling. And to simulate that is actually coming up here with maybe a little bit of a point to 2 or 3 strokes, almost like a little triangle, a little bit of a wedge going up into the white hair. And it just is creating the possibilities for you to be able to continue to modify that. But it also allows me to have the opportunity to put this integrating into this as this is going over that. And you can see these white hairs in here, probably integrating into that dark. And it could be really difficult. If you do a line through here, it's certainly not going to work. Then we have 2 confusing elements there. It's not really a dimension, and what is the line doing there, and which side is what. And so I like to just really make sure that I'm allowing not only for the interpretation as I go, but something that's going to allow me to make a lot of alterations or progress in the right direction down the line. And so I can have the best outcome that I can possibly have. Now also, I like to use these shorter tapered strokes because we don't want to just have something that comes all the way where we're starting and we're going over here and we're going down and we're following that, because the hair isn't like that. We'd be having something very similar to the mane hair, the bangs and things on the face if we were going to do that, because that's just like a stray long hair. If we put a bunch of them on here, it's just going to start competing with the mane and the bangs of this mane for the horse. So it's really good to practice using different length strokes. Think about your darks and lights, and give yourself the opportunity to continue interpreting this thing in a way that it starts making more sense and more sense when you add a little more and a little bit more. And then finally, you are really having very few pieces to put back in the puzzle, as we talked about yesterday. I like to just get to it slowly. If you try to do too much all at once, I think you can overcommit yourself. It can get confusing because maybe something doesn't really look right at that value or that development at that stage. And so I can take this little bit by little bit and end up by having something that is representing my drawing slowly. And as I look at this, I'm starting to see, oh, that's the dark part, this is the blaze. And later on, I can come back up in here and I can get a lighter pencil or a lighter stroke when I've developed this more, and I can work on the different contours and the light and dark values of the blaze. But I probably wouldn't do that until I have this developed enough that it is going to hold its own and be the darker value of the two, just like I don't want to have this become as dark as the eye. I want to keep making sure that as I get this darker and I'm assessing, I'm starting to lose the focus, I want to keep my focus on those deeper, darker places so that this really makes sense. My brain can tell exactly how dark this is supposed to be if I keep advancing this value. And it surely shouldn't be done all at once in my the way I draw. I just like to really have an opportunity to take it so far, and then I realize, I think that's just right. Maybe I'll walk away from it for a little bit. Maybe it's even a day or two, whatever it happens to be. And I'll come back and I'll say, no, I think it can stand some more value. Or I think I did get that, too dark. So as I'm going to come in here later, I'm going to gradually increase or maybe put a few more strokes. Maybe I need to use a darker pencil. I don't want this to become too grainy. And I definitely want to keep the spacing. Because what I'm going to do is when I get enough on here, now this gets kind of hard when I'm trying to do this very soon in the drawing, but I want to be able to use this brush so that I can take that extra lead from a little softer pencil than the 4H, and I can use it to cast some of that value into the lighter spaces, because we don't really have that light of a hair there. We want the light parts of this to be still darker than anything that's in here, and this helps me to be able not to have to draw so much. If I draw too much in some of these areas, I'm going to close the gaps. I'm going to lose my coarseness. I'm going to have something other than, a little coarser hair in there. And at some point, it's going to start becoming very solid. And it becomes a whole nother issue of how to get spaces back in there. You might be able to come in and, take a few things out, but boy, how tedious. Now you have a whole, another process you have to go through to try and achieve what you're trying to do. So, when I have an idea of the curve, I want to make sure I keep my strokes short, and I can keep them short because I have a taper, and I'm only going, so long, but they don't look like they're going to be, just these long draping hairs, especially if I come in here and I just a little bit change directions, just a little, not having everything extending. But when I change directions, it's almost like having this little V up here. This allows me to realize that there's something coming over the top, and this is going in to the darker places, just like we would have here, where we're going to go have it be a little bit darker as it goes underneath there. Well, when I have a V up here, and let me make a little darker one just to illustrate it, I'm going to demonstrate that it's going under and it's going into where there's less light. It's so slight, though, you really wouldn't want to do anything that dark or that defined. It's a very subtle thing, but boy, our brains are so powerful. And I just really maintain that if we think about what we're doing, we'll have an opportunity, to communicate it much more than you think, especially when you continue developing these principles and all the different things start going together to help you accomplish the overall task. It's an incredible thing. And so now that I'm having some of this build up in value, I'm starting to realize, oh, well, look at this is supposed to be a lot darker. I'm going to come in here and I'm going to build this up. And like I said, this is the problem in starting in a small area. Then this becomes more noticeable and doesn't really let you build overall all your values. But I hope you understand what I mean, because this is something that we might have done a little earlier, building up the value. And another thing about this is when I have a line like this, but the stroke is not, it's not going to be building in this kind of a curve. I want to be able to come almost an opposing angle to the curve of this jaw and yet still have something that is going to create a pretty good edge. So what I do is I have a kind of what I call looping at the end. I don't know whether you can see that or not. I'll try to push the right button here. And so as you come down, you actually let it angle in towards that other stroke a little closer. A little wider spacing up here, and it kind of funnels down into that finer place. And naturally, you're not going to want to just make a funnel like I'm saying, but you can see where it can start becoming an opportunity for you to create a little more density, and it's going to be a little darker there. Now, again, these strokes are a little longer to illustrate the point, but still, this gives you an opportunity to do something like this without having to have a border line, where you're just drawing a coloring book edge. And this can be refined, You can continue putting a few more strokes. Try not to plug it up so much that it just becomes a solid color, and allow this to build over time. Because once we have everything built up enough, we can come in here with the corner of the brush without overbrushing, and I can go ahead and create a little bit of value on those light areas so it starts pushing it back. Highlights are real important to pay attention to, because as you look at your highlights all over your drawing, you want to make sure that you pay attention to how bright one is compared to another. And like I said, there are highlights within this range of value here, but none of them are as bright as that. And there are even highlights in here because there's dimension to this hair. There's hair that is on the surface, and there's hair that's a little deeper. So that's naturally going to be darker. It's getting less light. And so I really want to watch my values, because that gives me a great opportunity. Let's see if I can pick up this other. I'm always covering up my stuff. Oh, here. That gives me the opportunity to start realizing what is having the direct hit of light. This is where the light is shining. Even though in this it can look like this is pretty bright, this is over on the shaded side of the face. But it's still a highlight because we still have contour over here. So you see that in the mane. We have, it's shaded more on this side because now we have a reflective light shining on the parts that are facing most towards this reflective light. And so it's really a great thing to start disciplining yourselves to pay attention to how bright your highlights are. Because if I make this just as bright, my mind is saying, wait a minute. Well, how come that's sticking up so far that it's catching this light? Oh, no, it isn't, because it's actually on this side. Oh, it must be, but it's on the shaded side. But see, you create conflict in your mind. And now you have to spend your time trying to explain why this doesn't make sense. And often you won't even realize it's the light. It's the value that you're using to make a highlight within that set of values. So anyway, I hope that this will help you a little bit. Want to come in here and maybe do one more, a third one, and maybe we can develop this a little bit further. But as far as structure, as far as value, clean edges, making sure we complement the contour, I think there's several things, if you have a chance to put them into practice, that will really help your drawings, regardless of what you're drawing. You can be drawing a rock and still have an opportunity to make this to your advantage. And so I'll go ahead and leave you for right now, and we'll see you in the next video. And appreciate you joining me. I hope this was helpful. Bye-bye.
All right, hope you enjoyed that. Again, this has been part 2 of a 3-part series that Darrel's doing on drawing a more realistic horse. We'll be back soon with part 3, and we'll be sure to update you in your email when that comes out. And keep in mind that we are working feverishly to finish packaging the complete Burdock the Horse DVD and download collection. And we're going to have that available to you in just a few days, and it's going to be heavily discounted, and there is an awesome free gift that comes with it. So get excited, get pumped up, but in the meantime, enjoy these classes and see what you can adopt and adapt to your own personal drawings. Thanks a lot. See you in the next video.